You know what haunts me about this case? It's not just that Liam Thompson vanished without a trace in the summer of 1996. It's not even the horrifying way he was found 5 months later. What keeps me up at night is how easily this could happen to anyone we love. How one decision, one moment, one wrong turn could change everything forever. July 1996. Kootenay National Park, British Columbia, Canada. A wilderness so vast and unforgiving that even experienced outdoorsmen treat it with respect. Liam Thompson knew this park. He'd hiked these trails dozens of times. He was 42 years old, fit, prepared, and confident. This wasn't some reckless adventure by an amateur. This was a man who understood the wilderness, who respected it, who knew how to survive in it. But here's the thing that makes my skin crawl: none of that mattered. When Liam kissed his wife Sarah goodbye that morning, when he hugged his 2 teenage daughters and promised he'd be back in 3 days, he had no idea he was walking into something that would destroy his family's lives forever. He had no idea that his name would become synonymous with one of the most disturbing disappearances in Canadian history. 3 days turned into 4. 4 turned into a week. Sarah Thompson called the park rangers on day 5, her voice shaking as she explained that Liam always came back on time. He was meticulous about his plans. He left detailed route maps. He checked in regularly. This wasn't like him. And that's when the nightmare truly began. The search team that mobilized was one of the most experienced in British Columbia. These weren't amateurs. These were men and women who'd found countless lost hikers, who'd rescued people from situations that seemed impossible. They knew every inch of Kootenay National Park. They'd seen it all, or so they thought. Week 1 of the search turned up nothing. Not a single trace. No campfire remnants. No footprints. No discarded water bottles or energy bar wrappers. Nothing. It was as if Liam Thompson had simply evaporated the moment he entered the park. Week 2 brought the same devastating emptiness. Sarah Thompson appeared on local news, her face drawn and pale, begging for information. Her daughters stood beside her, unable to speak, their eyes hollow with fear. "Please," Sarah whispered into the cameras. "If anyone has seen anything at all, please come forward. Liam is an experienced hiker. He knows these woods. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong." The lead searcher, Marcus Chen, gave an interview that sent chills through the community. "In my 20 years doing search and rescue," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "I've never seen anything like this. When someone goes missing in the wilderness, we find something. Always. A piece of clothing caught on a branch. A footprint in soft soil. Evidence of a campsite. But with Liam Thompson, it's like he was never here at all." Week 3. The search expanded to areas Liam couldn't possibly have reached on foot in the time he'd been missing. Helicopters with thermal imaging scoured the vast forests. Volunteer search parties combed through dense underbrush. The media coverage intensified. Liam's face was everywhere, on news broadcasts, in newspapers, on missing person posters tacked to every bulletin board in British Columbia. And still nothing. But here's what makes this case so much more than just a tragic disappearance. Here's why I need you to keep watching. Why this story matters to you even if you've never set foot in the Canadian wilderness. Because hidden within this nightmare is a lesson, actually, several lessons that could save someone you love. Lessons about preparation, about communication, about the decisions we make when we think we're safe. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you're going to understand exactly what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening to your family. Subscribe right now if you believe every life is worth finding. If you believe Liam Thompson deserves answers. Because the journey we're about to take together, it's going to shake you to your core. Week 4 arrived with August, and with it came a shift in the investigation. The reality was, setting in Liam Thompson might never be found alive. The search parameters changed. They were no longer looking for a lost hiker. They were looking for a body. Sarah Thompson refused to give up hope. "My husband is alive," she insisted to reporters, even as her voice cracked with exhaustion. "I can feel it. I know he's out there somewhere. He's waiting for us to find him." Her daughters weren't so sure anymore. The older one, Rebecca, was 17. She'd stopped going to school, stopped sleeping. She spent every waking hour staring at maps of the park, tracing possible routes her father might have taken, creating theories, making charts. The younger daughter, Emma, just 15, had retreated into complete silence. She hadn't spoken a word in 2 weeks. This is what disappearances do to families. They don't just take one person. They shatter everyone left behind. And then finally a breakthrough. It was August 23rd, nearly 6 weeks after Liam had vanished. A search dog named Dakota, a German shepherd with an extraordinary track record, picked up a scent near the eastern edge of the park. The handler, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, followed Dakota through increasingly rough terrain, her heart pounding as the dog became more agitated, more focused. Dakota led them to a small clearing, and there, half buried in leaves and debris, was Liam's backpack. The discovery sent shockwaves through the search team. Marcus Chen arrived within the hour, his hands shaking slightly as he carefully examined the backpack. "It's definitely his," he confirmed. "But this doesn't make sense. We've searched this area 3 times already. How did we miss this?" Jennifer Walsh shook her head, her face troubled. "We didn't miss it," she said quietly. "It wasn't here before. I'd stake my career on it." The implications hung heavy in the air. If the backpack hadn't been there during previous searches, that meant someone or something had placed it there recently. But who? And why? The contents of the backpack were meticulously documented. Liam's wallet, still containing his ID and credit cards. His compass, in perfect working order. His first aid kit, untouched. His emergency flare, unused. And most disturbingly, his journal, the last entry dated July 24th, the very day he'd entered the park. The entry was brief and unremarkable. "Beautiful day. Perfect conditions. Planning to reach the northern ridge by nightfall. Can't wait to see the view from up there. Feeling grateful." Nothing in those words suggested anything was wrong. Nothing hinted at the horror that was about to unfold. But Dakota wasn't finished. The dog pulled against her leash, whining and barking, desperate to continue tracking. Jennifer gave her the command to proceed, and Dakota took off like a shot, leading them deeper into the wilderness, farther from the established trails, into territory so remote that even experienced rangers rarely ventured there. They walked for 3 hours, following Dakota through dense forest, across rocky outcroppings, through streams swollen with summer runoff. And then they found it, a cave system that wasn't marked on any official park maps. Marcus Chen stood at the entrance, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "I've worked in this park for 15 years, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen this cave before. I didn't even know it existed." Dakota was going crazy now, barking frantically, pulling so hard against her leash that Jennifer had to use both hands to hold her back. Every instinct the dog possessed was screaming that something important was inside that cave. But the team made a decision that would haunt them for months. It was getting dark. The cave system appeared extensive and potentially dangerous. They needed proper equipment, more personnel, technical experts. They would mark the location and return at first light. That night, as they set up camp near the cave entrance, nobody could sleep. The forest around them seemed too quiet, too still. Marcus Chen sat by the fire, staring into the flames, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. "What do you think we're going to find in there?" one of the younger searchers asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his words were measured and careful. "I think we're going to find Liam Thompson. I think we're finally going to be able to give his family answers. But I also think," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I also think we're going to find something we're not prepared for." He was right. The next morning, August 24th, the expanded search team gathered at the cave entrance. They had spelunking experts, forensic technicians, additional search dogs, and sophisticated lighting equipment. They were ready for anything, or so they thought. The cave system was more extensive than anyone had imagined. Tunnels branched off in multiple directions, some barely wide enough to squeeze through, others opening into vast chambers with ceilings lost in darkness. The walls were slick with moisture, and the temperature dropped noticeably the deeper they went. They'd been exploring for about 40 minutes when Dakota suddenly stopped, her hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Jennifer knelt beside the dog, trying to calm her, and that's when she saw it. Scratches on the cave wall. Not random scratches, deliberate marks. Symbols. Marcus Chen moved closer with his flashlight. and his blood ran cold. The symbols were intricate, clearly made with intention and care. They weren't modern graffiti. They looked ancient, weathered, as if they'd been carved into the stone decades, maybe even centuries ago. "What the hell is this?" someone whispered. Nobody answered. Nobody knew. They continued deeper into the cave system, and the symbols became more frequent, more elaborate. Some were geometric patterns. Others resembled primitive depictions of human figures. And some looked like warnings. It was in the deepest chamber, nearly a quarter mile from the entrance, that they found him. Liam Thompson. I want you to understand something before I describe what they found. I want you to understand that the people who discovered Liam's body were trained professionals. They'd seen death before. They'd recovered bodies in various states of decomposition. They thought they were prepared. They weren't. Liam was slumped against the far wall of the chamber, his body positioned almost reverently, as if someone had carefully placed him there. That was disturbing enough. But what made experienced search and rescue personnel actually vomit? What made grown men and women turn away in horror? Were the marks. His skin, every visible inch of it, was covered in deep etchings. The same symbols from the cave walls had been carved into his flesh with meticulous precision. His arms, his chest, his back, his face, hundreds of symbols, cut deep enough to scar, arranged in patterns that seemed to follow some incomprehensible design. Marcus Chen's hand shook as he radioed for the coroner. "We found him," he managed to say. "But you need to get here now, all of you. You need to see this." And here's the thing that nobody could explain. The detail that would baffle investigators for months. Based on the state of decomposition, Liam Thompson had been dead for less than a week. Maybe even less than that. But he'd been missing for 6 weeks. Where had he been for the other 5 weeks? What had happened to him during that time? And who or what had done this to him? Comment below your theories right now. What do you think those strange marks mean? I read and reply to every single comment, and I want to hear what you're thinking. Because this case is about to get even stranger. The discovery of Liam Thompson's body should have brought closure to his family. It should have marked the end of their nightmare, the beginning of the grieving process. But instead, it opened up questions that were somehow even more terrifying than his disappearance. Like this video if you believe no one should be forgotten, if you believe justice must be found, even when the truth seems impossible. Because Sarah Thompson and her daughters deserved answers, and what they got instead was a mystery that defied explanation. The coroner's preliminary report, delivered 3 days after the discovery, only deepened the confusion. Time of death, approximately 5 to 7 days prior to discovery. Cause of death, exposure and dehydration. The etchings on his skin, made while he was still alive, over an extended period of time, with what appeared to be a sharp stone or primitive metal tool. Let me say that again because I need you to truly understand the horror of it. Those symbols weren't carved into Liam's body after he died. They were made while he was alive, over weeks, maybe months. The autopsy revealed other disturbing details. Liam's stomach contents showed he'd been eating roots, berries, small amounts of meat. He hadn't starved. He'd been surviving, or more accurately, being kept alive. His muscles showed signs of severe atrophy, suggesting prolonged immobility or confinement. But there were no signs of physical restraints, no rope burns or shackle marks. It was as if Liam Thompson had simply stayed in that cave of his own accord, allowing someone to slowly carve symbols into his skin, eating just enough to survive, making no attempt to escape or call for help. But that made no sense. Liam was strong, capable, and had every reason to want to return to his family. What could possibly have kept him in that cave? Dr. Patricia Morrison, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy, gave an interview that sent shockwaves through the investigation. "In my 30 years of experience," she said carefully, "I've never encountered anything quite like this. The precision of the carvings suggests they were made by someone with extensive anatomical knowledge, someone who knew exactly how deep to cut to create permanent scars without causing excessive bleeding or life-threatening injury. This wasn't torture in the traditional sense. This was..." She paused, struggling to find the right word. This was art. Horrifying, disturbing art, but art nonetheless. The police investigation kicked into high gear. Detective Sarah Blackwood was assigned to lead the case, and she approached it with the methodical intensity of someone who understood that every detail mattered. The first question: Who had access to that remote cave system? Interviews with local rangers, outdoorsmen, and indigenous community members revealed something troubling. The cave system wasn't unknown, it was forbidden. Several of the older indigenous residents spoke in hushed tones about it, describing it as a sacred and dangerous place that should never be entered. Thomas Whitehorse, an elder from the local Kunaksa Nation, agreed to speak with Detective Blackwood on the condition that his words be treated with respect. "That cave," he said softly, his weathered hands folded in his lap, "has been avoided by my people for generations. There are stories, old stories about what lives there, about what happens to those who venture too deep." When pressed for specifics, Thomas grew uncomfortable. "Some knowledge is not meant to be shared with outsiders," he said. "Some things are beyond your understanding, beyond your science and logic." But he did offer one chilling detail. "The symbols you found carved into that man's skin, they're not meaningless. They're not random. They tell a story. They mark him as belonging to something ancient, something that existed long before your cities and roads and laws." Detective Blackwood tried to remain skeptical, to focus on concrete evidence rather than folklore and superstition. But she couldn't ignore the consistency of the story she was hearing. Multiple indigenous elders from different communities told variations of the same tale. There was a hidden tribe deep in the wilderness, descendants of people who'd rejected contact with the modern world centuries ago, who maintained the old ways, who guarded secrets that were not meant for outsiders. These people weren't just myth or legend. They were real. Or at least, they had been real at some point in history. Whether they still existed now, that was the question that haunted the investigation. September arrived, bringing with it crisp autumn air and a growing sense of urgency. The case had attracted national attention. News crews descended on the small town near Kootenay National Park. True crime podcasters dissected every detail. Armchair detectives on internet forums proposed increasingly wild theories. And Sarah Thompson, Liam's widow, stood in the center of it all, trying desperately to make sense of her husband's death. "They keep asking me if Liam was involved in something," she told reporters, her voice breaking. "If he had secrets, if he was into anything strange or occult or dangerous. And I want to scream at them that they didn't know him. Liam was the most straightforward, honest, normal person you could ever meet. He worked as an accountant, for God's sake. He liked fishing and hiking and watching hockey. He wasn't involved in anything sinister. He just wanted a few days alone in nature to clear his head." Rebecca, Liam's older daughter, had a different reaction. She'd become obsessed with the symbols carved into her father's skin. She obtained copies of the photographs from the crime scene, something she absolutely should not have had access to, and spent hours, days, weeks trying to decipher them. "They mean something," she insisted to anyone who would listen. "Dad was trying to tell us something. These aren't just random marks, they're a message." Her mother begged her to stop, to let the police handle the investigation, to focus on healing. But Rebecca couldn't let it go. She'd lost her father, and she needed answers more than she needed anything else in the world. It was Rebecca who made the connection that would crack the case wide open. She'd been researching indigenous art and symbolism, poring through academic journals and historical texts, when she found a reference to a near-extinct language spoken by a small group of people who'd lived in the Kootenay region in the early 1800s. The language had been documented by a French missionary before the tribe had vanished completely, their fate unknown. The symbols in the missionary's notes matched the symbols carved into her father's skin. Rebecca contacted Detective Blackwood immediately, her hands shaking as she laid out her findings. "I think I know what the marks mean," she said. "I think they're words, sentences, a story." A linguistics expert from the University of British Columbia was brought in to examine the evidence. Dr. James Chen spent 2 weeks analyzing the symbols, cross-referencing them with the missionary's notes, piecing together a translation. What he discovered made everyone in the investigation room fall silent. The symbols told the story of a man who'd wandered into forbidden territory, a man who'd been found by the guardians of the sacred spaces, a man who'd been chosen not for death, but for transformation. The markings were meant to prepare him, to make him worthy, to integrate him into something ancient and unknowable. But the transformation had been interrupted. Liam had died before it could be completed. And according to the symbols, this was a tragedy not for Liam, but for those who'd been preparing him. "This can't be real," Detective Blackwood said, But her voice lacked conviction. This has to be some kind of elaborate hoax. A cult, maybe. Some sick group of people playing out their twisted fantasies. Dr. Chen shook his head slowly. The linguistic patterns are authentic. These symbols match a language that's been dead for over 200 years. The only way someone could have known how to use them is if they'd learned directly from native speakers. And according to historical records, there haven't been any native speakers of this language since the mid-1800s. The implication hung heavy in the air, unless the hidden tribe wasn't just legend. Unless they'd survived, passed down their language and traditions through generations, living in complete isolation from the modern world. Detective Blackwood made a decision that would define the rest of the investigation. "We're going back to that cave," she announced. "We're going to search every inch of it. We're going to find evidence of who did this to Liam Thompson, and we're going to bring them to justice." The second expedition to the cave system was mounted in early October. This time, they brought more personnel, better equipment, and a determination to uncover the truth. They documented every symbol, every chamber, every tunnel. They collected soil samples, analyzed the air composition, searched for any sign of recent human activity. And they found it. In a chamber even deeper than where Liam's body had been discovered, they found evidence of habitation. A small fire pit with ashes that were only weeks old. Primitive tools made from stone and bone. Woven baskets containing dried foods. And most disturbingly, a small shrine decorated with items that clearly came from the modern world. A plastic water bottle, a digital watch, a child's toy truck. Someone had been living in this cave recently. Someone who had access to the outside world but chose to remain hidden. Someone who knew about Liam Thompson. Marcus Chen found the next clue, tucked into a small crevice in the cave wall. It was a piece of paper, modern notebook paper, with words written in English. The message was simple and chilling. He was chosen. He was willing. You cannot understand. That message, those 11 words, changed everything. What if Liam Thompson hadn't been kidnapped? What if he'd gone into that cave voluntarily? What if he'd encountered the hidden tribe and, for reasons nobody could fathom, decided to stay with them? Share this video with friends who love a good mystery. Let's uncover the truth together. Because what I'm about to tell you next, it's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about this case. Detective Blackwood began reinvestigating Liam's life with a new focus. She interviewed his coworkers, his friends, his extended family. She combed through his computer, his bank records, his phone logs. She was looking for any indication that Liam had been searching for something, planning something, hiding something. And she found it. 3 months before his disappearance, Liam had checked out 6 books from the local library. All of them dealt with indigenous cultures, spiritual practices, and the concept of voluntary isolation from modern society. He'd attended a lecture at the university about lost tribes and uncontacted peoples. He'd made donations to organizations that work to protect indigenous land rights. Sarah Thompson was shocked when presented with this information. "He never mentioned any of this to me," she said, her voice small and confused. "We talked about everything. Why would he hide this?" Rebecca had a theory. "Maybe he knew you wouldn't understand. Maybe he knew it would sound crazy." The investigators dug deeper. They discovered that Liam had been corresponding with an anthropologist named Dr. Michael Torres, who specialized in isolated communities. The emails between them were cordial and academic at first. But as the months progressed, they became more personal, more philosophical. In his last email to Dr. Torres, sent just 2 weeks before his disappearance, Liam had written, "I think I've found what I've been looking for. I think I know where they are. I just need the courage to take the first step." Dr. Torres, when contacted by police, was devastated. "I thought we were just having intellectual discussions," he said, his face pale. "I never imagined he would actually try to find them. I never thought he'd risk his life." "Find who?" Detective Blackwood demanded. Dr. Torres hesitated, then spoke carefully. "There have been rumors for years about a group of people living completely off-grid in the Kootenay region. Not just camping or living sustainably, but truly separated from modern civilization. Most anthropologists dismiss it as folklore, but Liam believed. And he wanted to find them. He wanted to understand how they'd maintained their way of life in a world that's so different from what their ancestors knew." The investigation took another turn when they discovered Liam's personal journal, not the one found in his backpack, but a private journal he'd kept hidden in his home office. Sarah had never known it existed. The entries in that journal painted a picture of a man who was struggling, searching for meaning, questioning the modern lifestyle he'd built. He wrote about feeling disconnected from nature, from authentic human experience, from anything that felt truly real. He wrote about his job, his routine, his comfortable life, and how it all felt increasingly hollow. One entry, dated 6 months before his disappearance, read, "What if we've got it all wrong? What if the isolated tribes aren't the ones who are lost? What if we're the lost ones, and they're the ones who found something worth holding on to?" Another entry, just a month before he vanished. "I need to know. I need to see for myself if it's possible to live differently, to be connected to something deeper than quarterly earnings reports and mortgage payments. If I don't find out, I think I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Sarah Thompson read these entries with tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea he felt this way," she whispered. "How could I have been married to him for 20 years and not known he was this unhappy?" "Maybe he wasn't unhappy with you," Detective Blackwood said gently. "Maybe he was unhappy with himself, with his choices, with the world he'd built." The picture that emerged was complicated and heartbreaking. Liam Thompson hadn't been kidnapped or murdered in any traditional sense. He'd walked into that wilderness actively seeking something, a tribe, a different way of life, maybe even a transformation. And somehow, he'd found exactly what he was looking for. But it had killed him. December 1996 brought snow to Kootenay National Park and a growing acceptance that the case might never be fully solved. The hidden tribe, if they existed, had vanished again. Despite extensive searches and surveillance of the cave system, no further evidence of habitation was found. It was as if the people who'd lived there had simply melted back into the wilderness. The official police report concluded that Liam Thompson had likely encountered a small group of individuals living in isolation, possibly descendants of the indigenous peoples who'd historically inhabited the region. Whether through coercion or willingness, Liam had remained with this group for approximately 5 weeks. The symbols carved into his skin appeared to be part of some kind of ritual or ceremonial practice. His death was ruled as accidental, resulting from exposure and dehydration, though the circumstances leading to his death remained unclear. It was a neat, tidy conclusion that satisfied no one. Sarah Thompson held a funeral for her husband in January 1997. She buried an empty casket. Liam's body was still being held as evidence, but she needed the ritual, needed the closure. She needed a place to say goodbye. At the funeral, she spoke about the Liam she'd known, the devoted father, the reliable husband, the man who'd always been there when his family needed him. But she also acknowledged the Liam she hadn't known, the seeker, the questioner, the man who'd yearned for something she couldn't provide. "I will never fully understand why he left us," she said to the gathered mourners. "I will never understand what he found in that wilderness that seemed more important than coming home to his family. But I choose to believe that in his final weeks, he found what he was searching for. I choose to believe he died at peace with his choice, even if I can never be at peace with losing him." Rebecca had a different perspective. She'd spent months studying the symbols, learning everything she could about the lost language, trying to understand what her father had gone through. At the funeral, she spoke directly to him. "Dad," she said, her voice strong despite her tears, "I think I understand now. You needed to know if there was something more. You needed to believe that humans could live differently, could connect to something ancient and sacred that we've lost in our modern world. And you found it. You actually found it. I'm angry that you left us. I'm devastated that you're gone. But I'm also proud of you for having the courage to seek what you needed, even though it cost you everything." The funeral should have been the end of the story. But 2 weeks later, something happened that reignited everything. A hiker found a small bundle tucked into a tree hollow near the cave entrance. Inside was Liam's wedding ring, which had been missing from his body when it was discovered, and a piece of bark with a message carved into it in English. The message read, "He walks with the ancestors now. Honor his choice." Detective Blackwood stood in the snow, holding that piece of bark, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter temperature. Someone from the hidden tribe had returned. They'd left this message deliberately, knowing it would be found. They were confirming what the investigation had suspected. Liam Thompson had chosen this path. He'd chosen the symbols, the ritual, the transformation. He'd chosen to leave his old life behind, even if he hadn't fully understood the cost. But here's what haunts me most about this case, what I think about late at night when I can't sleep. The message said Liam's choice should be honored. But was it really a choice? How much choice does anyone have when they're searching desperately for meaning, when they're vulnerable and lost and yearning for connection to something greater than themselves? If Liam had known he would die, would he still have made the same decision? If he'd known what his disappearance would do to his wife and daughters, would he still have walked into that cave? We'll never know. And that uncertainty is almost as painful as his death. The case was officially closed in March 1997. The hidden tribe was never found. The symbols were never fully deciphered beyond the basic translation Dr. Chen had provided. The cave system was sealed off by park authorities, marked as dangerous and off-limits to the public. But the questions lingered. The mystery endured. And Sarah Thompson, Rebecca, and Emma were left to build new lives in the shadow of Liam's choice. I want you to comment below right now. What do you think? Was Liam Thompson a victim, or was he someone who chose his own fate? Should we honor his decision or mourn it as a tragedy? I reply to every single comment because your perspective matters. Your voice matters. And this case, it deserves to be discussed, debated, examined from every angle. Years passed. Sarah eventually remarried, finding companionship with a gentleman who understood that she would always carry Liam with her. Emma went to college, became a therapist who specialized in helping families cope with ambiguous loss. And Rebecca became an anthropologist, dedicating her life to understanding indigenous cultures and the human need for connection to something beyond the modern world. My father died searching for meaning, Rebecca said in an interview on the 10-year anniversary of Liam's disappearance, and in a strange way, his death gave me meaning. It showed me what I wanted to do with my life. He wanted to understand how people lived authentically, how they maintained connection to ancient wisdom, and that's exactly what I'm trying to understand now. I'm carrying on his search, but I'm doing it in a way that doesn't require me to abandon everyone I love. She paused, her eyes distant. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever find what he found, and sometimes I wonder if I want to. Because whatever he discovered in that cave, whatever truth those symbols represented, it wasn't something he could bring back and share with us. It was something that required total surrender, total transformation, and the cost of that transformation was his life. The case of Liam Thompson became a touchstone in discussions about voluntary disappearance, about the limits of modern life, about what happens when the search for meaning becomes dangerous. Documentaries were made. Books were written. The story took on a life of its own, sometimes losing touch with the real people at its center. But every year on July 24th, the anniversary of Liam's disappearance, Sarah and her daughters make a pilgrimage to the edge of Kootenay National Park. They don't go near the cave, they can't, it's sealed, but they stand at the boundary between the civilized world and the wilderness, and they remember the man Liam was, the father, the husband, the seeker. They remember his laugh, his terrible jokes, his genuine love for his family. And they remember that he made a choice they can never fully understand, a choice that took him away from them forever. I used to be angry, Sarah said during one of these anniversary visits, her voice carried on the wind. I used to rage at him for leaving us, but now I just feel sad. Sad that he couldn't find what he needed in the life we'd built together. Sad that the modern world felt so empty to him that he was willing to risk everything for something different. And sad that I couldn't help him, couldn't be what he needed, couldn't save him from himself. Emma put her arm around her mother. He made his own choices. Mom, you couldn't have saved him because he didn't want to be saved. That's the hardest truth, but it's the truth. Rebecca added quietly, and maybe that's okay. Maybe not everyone can be saved. Maybe some people need to walk their own path, even if it leads somewhere the rest of us can't follow. The case officially remains unsolved in the sense that no one was ever arrested or charged. The hidden tribe, if they exist, continue to evade detection. The cave system, though sealed, remains a source of fascination and speculation. But in another sense, the case is solved. We know what happened to Liam Thompson, even if we don't understand why. We know he sought something beyond the ordinary, found it, and paid the ultimate price. We know his body bore the marks of a transformation he didn't survive. We know he left behind people who loved him and will never stop missing him. And we know that his story serves as both a warning and an inspiration, depending on how you choose to interpret it. Now, before we wrap up this investigation, I promised you something at the beginning. I promised you lessons that could protect your loved ones. Because as horrifying as Liam's story is, it contains wisdom we can all use. Understanding what happened to him, understanding the warning signs, understanding the vulnerabilities that led to his disappearance, all of this can help prevent similar tragedies. So, let me share with you the 5 critical lessons from the Liam Thompson case. I'm going to present them in reverse order, building up to the most important one. Pay close attention, because these insights could literally save a life. Thank you for watching this far. Before we get to these lessons, please hit subscribe if you believe these stories matter, if you believe we can learn from tragedy, if you believe knowledge is our best defense against the unknown dangers in this world. Like this video, share it with people who care about safety and awareness, and let's make sure Liam Thompson's story serves a purpose beyond just being a mystery. Lesson 5. The danger of romanticizing isolation and alternative lifestyles. Here's something we don't talk about enough in our modern world: the seductive appeal of radical change. Social media feeds are full of people who've supposedly abandoned the rat race, who live in tiny houses or off-grid homesteads or nomadic vehicles, who've rejected conventional success in favor of authentic experiences. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those choices, they can create a dangerous fantasy in the minds of people who are struggling with normal life dissatisfaction. Liam Thompson fell into this trap. He began romanticizing a lifestyle he knew nothing about, projecting his desires and needs onto a fantasy of indigenous isolation. He imagined that living apart from modern society would automatically bring meaning, connection, and peace. He thought that by finding this hidden tribe, he would find himself. But here's the reality. You can't escape yourself by escaping your circumstances. The problems you're running from will follow you wherever you go, because they live inside you, not in your environment. If someone you love is showing signs of wanting to drastically change their life, to abandon everything for some idealized alternative, don't dismiss it as a harmless fantasy. Engage with it. Ask questions. Understand what they're really seeking. Are they trying to solve internal problems through external changes? Are they running towards something or away from something? In Liam's case, he was clearly running away from feelings of emptiness and disconnection. But instead of addressing those feelings through therapy, community involvement, deeper conversations with his family, or other healthy interventions, he decided the solution was to completely abandon his life. That's a warning sign. That's a red flag that deserves serious attention. Here's what you can do. If someone in your life starts talking about radical lifestyle changes, especially changes that involve isolation or cutting ties with their support system, create space for honest conversation. Don't judge or mock their desires. Try to understand what emotional need they're trying to meet, and gently encourage them to seek professional help to explore these feelings in a safe, structured way. Remember, it's not about preventing all change. Change can be healthy and necessary. It's about ensuring that changes are made mindfully, with full understanding of the consequences, and with proper support systems in place. Liam made life-altering decisions alone, in secret, without the people who loved him knowing what he was planning. That isolation in his decision-making process was itself a danger sign. Share this video if you know someone who might be struggling with these kinds of thoughts. Sometimes, just knowing that others understand can make all the difference. Lesson 4. The importance of communication in relationships. Sarah Thompson was married to Liam for 20 years. She thought she knew him. She thought they talked about everything. And yet, Liam was harboring deep dissatisfaction, spiritual yearning, and plans to drastically alter his life, and she had no idea. How does that happen? How can two people share a bed, raise children together, build a life together, and still remain fundamentally unknown to each other? The answer is both simple and complicated. We stop asking the deep questions. We get comfortable. We assume that because we know someone's daily routines and surface preferences, we know their inner world. But humans are constantly evolving, constantly processing new thoughts and feelings, constantly grappling with existential questions about meaning and purpose. If you're not regularly checking in with the people you love about their inner landscape, if you're not creating space for vulnerable, honest conversations about fear and longing and dissatisfaction, then you're living with strangers wearing familiar faces. Liam kept his spiritual searching secret from Sarah. Maybe he thought she wouldn't understand. Maybe he was ashamed of his feelings. Maybe he didn't know how to articulate what he was experiencing. But that silence created a dangerous gap between them. A gap that allowed Liam to venture further and further into risky territory without any accountability or alternative perspectives. Here's what healthy communication looks like in practice. Regular, intentional conversations about more than just logistics and scheduling. Questions like, what's been on your mind lately? What are you struggling with? What do you wish was different about your life? Is there anything you're afraid to tell me? These aren't comfortable questions, especially in long-term relationships where you've settled into comfortable patterns, but they're essential. And equally important, creating a judgment-free space where these conversations can happen. Sarah wasn't a bad wife, she didn't fail Liam. But the pattern in their relationship apparently didn't include deep, vulnerable sharing about dissatisfaction and yearning, maybe because it felt threatening, maybe because they'd never established that pattern early on. If you're in a relationship, romantic, familial, or deep friendship, make it a practice to go beneath the surface regularly. And when someone shares something difficult, something that challenges your understanding of them, resist the urge to fix it or dismiss it or make it about yourself. Just listen. Just create space. Just let them know that whatever they're feeling, you're there to work through it with them. If Liam had felt he could share his spiritual crisis with Sarah, if they'd been able to talk honestly about his feelings of disconnection and emptiness, would he still have ended up in that cave? Maybe. But maybe Sarah could have helped him find healthier ways to address his needs. Maybe they could have explored spiritual practices together, or taken a sabbatical to volunteer in indigenous communities, or found a therapist who specialized in existential questions. Maybe. We'll never know. But we can learn from their missed opportunities. We can commit to deeper communication in our own relationships. We can make sure the people we love know they can tell us anything, even thoughts that scare them or challenge the life we've built together. Subscribe if you believe relationships deserve this level of honest communication. Like if you're committed to asking the hard questions with the people you love. Lesson 3. Understanding the warning signs of dangerous obsession. Let me walk you through Liam's progression, because it follows a pattern that appears in many cases of dangerous obsession. First, he developed an intense interest in a specific topic, indigenous cultures and alternative ways of living. Nothing wrong with intellectual curiosity, right? Lots of people study topics that fascinate them without it leading anywhere dangerous. But then the interest became exclusive. He stopped engaging with other topics. His reading, his computer searches, his conversations all centered on this one area. His family didn't notice because he was keeping it private, but if they'd known, they would have seen someone becoming increasingly single-focused. Next, he started corresponding with experts, seeking validation and information. He was building a knowledge base, preparing himself. Again, not inherently dangerous, but another escalation. Then he moved from theoretical interest to practical planning. He was researching the specific locations where isolated tribes might exist. He was physically preparing himself for wilderness survival. He was getting ready to act on his obsession. And finally, he took action secretly, without telling anyone who might question or stop him. This progression from casual interest to dangerous obsession is remarkably common. It appears in cases of people who join cults, who pursue conspiracy theories to dangerous extremes, who become radicalized by online communities, who develop eating disorders or addiction, or any number of other destructive patterns. The key warning signs are: 1. Increasing isolation. The person withdraws from normal social connections and activities, spending more time alone with their obsession. 2. Secrecy. They're hiding what they're thinking about, researching, or planning. They're creating separate email accounts, clearing browser histories, having conversations they don't want others to know about. 3. Black and white thinking. The obsession becomes the answer to everything. The person loses nuance and perspective, seeing their area of focus as the only truth that matters. 4. Dismissal of concerns. If anyone does express worry about their behavior or focus, they brush it off. get defensive, or simply lie about it. 5. Practical preparation. They're not just thinking or reading anymore. They're taking concrete steps toward acting on their obsession. If you notice these signs in someone you care about, intervention is critical. Not aggressive confrontation, but genuine, concerned engagement. Express what you've observed without judgment. Acknowledge that their interest clearly matters to them, but also share your concerns about how it seems to be affecting their life and relationships. Offer to help them find healthy ways to explore their interest. Suggest speaking with a therapist who can help them process what's driving their obsession. Most importantly, make it clear that you're not trying to control them, but you love them and want to make sure they're safe. Will this always work? No. Sometimes people are so deep into their obsession that they're not reachable through conversation. But sometimes, having someone notice and care and speak up can interrupt the progression before it reaches a dangerous point. Liam needed someone to notice how far he'd gone down this rabbit hole. He needed someone to say, "Hey, this seems to have become really important to you. Let's talk about what's driving this interest. Let's figure out healthy ways to address whatever needs you're trying to meet." Without that intervention, he continued down a path that ultimately killed him. Comment below if you've ever experienced dangerous obsession, either personally or in someone you love. How did you recognize it? What helped? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with this issue right now. Lesson 2. The critical importance of detailed trip plans and check-ins. Here's a practical, concrete lesson that could literally save lives. Liam's search and rescue operation was significantly hampered because his trip plan was vague, and his check-in system was non-existent. He told his family he'd be gone for 3 days. He mentioned he was going to Kootenay National Park. He left a general route map, but that was it. He didn't specify exact campsites, didn't establish a schedule for checking in, didn't give anyone specific landmarks or coordinates to narrow the search area if something went wrong. When he didn't return on day 3, Sarah waited until day 5 to call authorities. Why? Because Liam was experienced, and she assumed he'd just decided to extend his trip. She had no way of knowing something was wrong because they hadn't established clear expectations. By the time search and rescue mobilized, Liam had been missing for nearly a week. If he'd been injured or lost in a traditional sense, those first days were critical. The delay potentially cost him his life, or at least would have in a more conventional emergency. Here's what a proper trip plan looks like. Specific itinerary with dates, times, and locations. Not just, "I'll be at this park for 3 days," but day 1, "I'll hike from trailhead X to campsite Y, approximately 8 miles. Day 2, "I'll summit peak Z and camp at location A. Day 3, "I'll return via trail B, expecting to reach my car by 4 p.m. Multiple copies of the plan. One with family, one with a friend, one filed with park authorities if that's an option, and one in your vehicle at the trailhead. Scheduled check-ins. I'll call or text at 6 p.m. each evening. If you don't hear from me by 7 p.m., start worrying. If you don't hear from me by 9 p.m., call search and rescue." Clear deviation protocols. If weather or conditions require me to change my plan, I'll notify you immediately with the new plan. If you receive an altered plan notification, acknowledge it so I know you received it. Emergency contacts and medical information. Make sure your trip plan includes relevant medical conditions, medications, allergies, and emergency contact information beyond just immediate family. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds paranoid. This sounds like overkill. I'm an experienced outdoorsman. I don't need this level of structure. You know who is an experienced outdoorsman? Liam Thompson. And he's dead. The wilderness doesn't care about your experience level. Accidents happen. Weather changes. Equipment fails. Wildlife encounters go wrong. Medical emergencies strike without warning. And in those moments, having a detailed trip plan and check-in system can mean the difference between a close call and a tragedy. But here's the thing. This lesson applies beyond wilderness adventures. Anytime someone is doing something potentially risky, whether it's solo travel, meeting someone they met online, exploring an unfamiliar area, or even just driving across the country, having a clear plan and check-in system is crucial. Tell people where you're going, what you're doing, and when you'll be back. Establish times when you'll check in. Make sure someone knows to worry if they don't hear from you. It's not about being paranoid or distrustful. It's about recognizing that we're all vulnerable in various ways, and having people who know our whereabouts and can raise the alarm if something goes wrong is just basic safety. After Liam's case, Sarah Thompson became an advocate for trip planning and wilderness safety. She speaks at hiking clubs and outdoor recreation groups, sharing her husband's story and begging people to take these precautions seriously. 5 minutes of planning could have saved my husband's life, she says in these presentations. 5 minutes to write down exactly where he was going and when he'd be back. 5 minutes to establish when I should start worrying. That's all it would have taken. And I would still have my husband. My daughters would still have their father. Don't let pride or independence or the illusion of invincibility prevent you from taking this simple precaution. And if someone you love is about to embark on any kind of solo adventure, insist on a detailed trip plan and check-in system. Make it non-negotiable. Make it a condition of your peace of mind. Because the worst thing in the world is not knowing. Not knowing where someone is, if they're safe, if they need help. Having a plan eliminates that uncertainty and ensures that help can arrive quickly if it's needed. Share this video with anyone who does outdoor recreation or solo travel. This lesson is too important to keep to yourself. Lesson 1. The absolute necessity of addressing mental health and existential crisis. And now we arrive at the most important lesson from Liam Thompson's tragic disappearance. The lesson that supersedes all others. The lesson that, if learned and applied, could prevent countless tragedies. Liam Thompson was experiencing an existential crisis. He was grappling with questions of meaning, purpose, authenticity, and connection. These are profound, difficult, universal human struggles. There is nothing abnormal or shameful about facing these questions. But Liam made a fatal mistake. He tried to solve his existential crisis alone, through external action, without professional support or healthy processing. He thought the answer to his emptiness was out there somewhere in the wilderness, in an isolated tribe, in a completely different way of living. He thought if he could just find this thing, experience it, become part of it, his internal struggle would resolve. This is magical thinking, and it's incredibly dangerous. Existential crises, spiritual emergencies, profound dissatisfaction with modern life. These are mental health issues that require mental health interventions. They require therapy, ideally with someone trained in existential psychology or spiritual counseling. They require community support, peer discussion, and carefully guided exploration of meaning-making. What they don't require is abandoning your life and walking into the wilderness to find a mythical, hidden tribe. But our society has a complicated relationship with mental health. We've made progress in destigmatizing therapy and medication for depression and anxiety. But we still struggle to recognize and address subtler psychological struggles, the kind that don't look like traditional mental illness but are just as dangerous. A man who's questioning the meaning of his existence, who feels disconnected from authentic experience, who yearns for something deeper than his daily routine, that man is struggling. That man needs help. But because he's still going to work, still paying his bills, still functioning on the surface, his struggle gets dismissed as a midlife crisis, or philosophical pondering, or harmless daydreaming, until it becomes deadly. Here's what I need you to understand. If you or someone you love is experiencing persistent feelings of meaninglessness, disconnection, or profound dissatisfaction with life, that is a mental health emergency. It may not feel urgent because it's not acute. There's no suicide attempt, no psychotic break, no obvious crisis. But it's still an emergency because untreated, it can lead to catastrophic decisions. Liam needed therapy. He needed someone trained to help him explore his feelings of emptiness and disconnection in a safe, structured way. He needed to understand that the problem wasn't his life or his family or modern civilization. The problem was his relationship with his life, his inability to find meaning in his circumstances, his disconnection from himself and others. These are internal problems that require internal solutions. No external change, no adventure, no geographic relocation, no lifestyle transformation will fix them. You can run to the ends of the earth, and you'll still be running from yourself. Therapy for existential issues can help people identify the real needs underlying their dissatisfaction. Often, what feels like a need for radical change is actually a need for deeper connection, more authentic self-expression, or better alignment between values and daily life. These needs can often be met through smaller, safer changes. Develop practices for finding meaning in ordinary life. Meaning isn't something you find out there. It's something you create through how you engage with your life, your relationships, your work, your community. Process grief about limitations and mortality. Sometimes existential crisis stems from confronting the reality that life is finite, that we can't do everything or be everything. Working through this grief in therapy can help people make peace with their choices and find fulfillment within realistic boundaries. Build connection and community. Existential isolation is real and painful, but the solution isn't physical isolation from society. It's finding or creating communities where authentic connection is possible. If Liam had done this work, if he'd spent those months before his disappearance in therapy, rather than secretly researching hidden tribes, the outcome would have been different. He might have found ways to bring more meaning into his existing life. He might have made thoughtful, supported changes that didn't require abandoning his family. He might have discovered that what he was really seeking, connection, authenticity, purpose, was available to him all along, if he knew how to access it. But he didn't do that work, and he died. So here's what I'm asking you to do. If you're struggling with feelings of meaninglessness or disconnection, please seek professional help. Find a therapist who specializes in existential issues or spiritual counseling. Don't try to solve this alone. Don't think you need to make dramatic life changes to find what you're looking for. And if someone you love is showing signs of existential struggle, talking about how empty life feels, questioning the point of everything, romanticizing alternative lifestyles, or radical change, please encourage them to get help. Don't dismiss it as a phase. Don't assume they'll figure it out on their own. Insist that they talk to a professional who can help them navigate these profound questions safely. Mental health care isn't just for people with diagnosed disorders. It's for anyone struggling to make sense of life, to find meaning, to feel connected and purposeful. That includes people going through existential crises. That included Liam Thompson. By understanding what happened to Liam, by recognizing the warning signs, by knowing these lessons, you can take control of your own family's safety. You can prevent the kind of tragedy that destroyed the Thompson family. You can make sure that the people you love, if they're struggling, get the help they need before their struggle becomes dangerous. Subscribe to this channel if you believe mental health matters. If you believe these stories can teach us how to protect ourselves and our loved ones. If you believe that Liam Thompson's death should mean something beyond just being a mystery. And as we close this investigation, I want to remind you, every case we examine here has lessons embedded in it. Every disappearance, every tragedy, every mystery, they all contain wisdom we can use to keep ourselves and our loved ones safer. Liam Thompson's story is heartbreaking. It's unsettling. It raises questions we may never fully answer about what he encountered in that cave, what he experienced during those final weeks, what the symbols on his skin truly meant. But it also teaches us about the importance of communication, the danger of obsession, the necessity of trip planning, the warning signs of dangerous ideation, and above all, the critical importance of addressing mental health and existential struggles with professional support. These lessons are Liam's legacy. They're what his suffering and death can give to the rest of us, knowledge that might prevent similar tragedies. Sarah Thompson, in her final interview for the 10-year anniversary documentary, said something that has stayed with me ever since. She said, "I can't bring Liam back. I can't undo his choices or save him from what happened in that cave. But if sharing our story prevents even one family from going through what we went through, if it helps even one person recognize the warning signs and get help before it's too late, then maybe Liam's death will have meaning. Maybe his struggle will help someone else survive their own." That's why we tell these stories. That's why we examine these cases. Not for entertainment, not for shock value, but because understanding what goes wrong can help us prevent it from going wrong again. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about Liam Thompson and his family. Thank you for being willing to learn from this tragedy. I read and reply to every single comment, so please share your thoughts. What do you think happened in those final weeks? How do you think we can better support people who are struggling with existential questions? What other lessons do you see in this case? Like this video if it made you think differently about mental health, wilderness, safety, or the importance of communication. Share it with anyone who needs to hear these lessons. And subscribe because we have more cases coming, more stories that need to be told, more lessons that need to be learned. The Liam Thompson case remains officially unsolved. The hidden tribe, if they exist, have never been found. The cave is sealed, the symbols are documented but not fully understood, and the truth of what happened in those final weeks may never be completely known. But we know enough. We know enough to learn. We know enough to change. We know enough to protect the people we love. And sometimes that has to be enough. Until next time, stay safe out there. Check in with your loved ones. Have the hard conversations. Don't ignore the warning signs. And remember, the wilderness isn't the only dangerous place. Sometimes the most dangerous journey is the one someone takes alone, inside their own mind, trying to find answers to questions that require support and guidance to navigate safely. Take care of each other. And I'll see you in the next investigation.